You are listening to the Adapt Performance podcast, where we aim to make elite level strength and conditioning accessible to everybody. I'm your host, Jordan Webster, and let's get into the episode. Yes, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Adapt Performance podcast. So in today's episode, we are doing a Q&A based episode. So I put out a little question box on Instagram and got some sick questions really quick as well, which is cool. So I'm going to dive straight in just so I can get through them all, because I want to spend a decent amount of time kind of going through them. Just give me a sec to bloody have a drink. Don't know if you guys have like an emotional reaction to like certain glasses and certain mugs and cups and stuff in your house, but I've lost my Beaver Town glass. Obviously it's not mine because it was probably stolen. I don't even know where we acquired it, where we were gifted it. But yeah, I've lost it and I'm fuming. So I've got like this shit one from IKEA. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, we're going to go through some questions. And yeah, let me just kind of freestyle on them a little bit and see where we end up with things. So the first one is like, what are my general thoughts on triphasic training? So yeah, it's a good question. And look, I will preface this saying I'm not an expert in this realm. I'm not an expert in any realm, but particularly here, you know, I have some experience, but I'm not a triphasic guy, so I couldn't give you the nuts and bolts of the thing. But yeah, I'll give you what I've got. So for the people that don't know like what triphasic is, it is a training method that was popularized by a guy called Cal Dietz. So he's an American chappie. Essentially, he's really well respected in the strength and conditioning industry. You know, probably one of the front runners in terms of creating books and putting out resources. And you know, I think nowadays he probably gets a little bit of backlash from people when you've got like contrarian opinions, and some of the stuff that he does put out there is a little bit wacky, you know, and there's probably some things in there that I don't necessarily feel like are the most valuable in the world, but you know, it is what it is. We can't please everybody. But essentially what triphasic is, it's tri meaning three, phasic meaning like phases of movement, you know. So essentially when we think about the bread and butter of what triphasic is about, it's about splitting training blocks, to my knowledge, into an eccentric phase of training, so like the muscle lengthening phase, isometric, meaning, you know, the bottom of the movement, you know, the stage between eccentric and concentric, okay, so you got eccentric, isometric, concentric. And the idea being, if we think about athletic movements, they're probably all going to encompass elements of these, right? And you might be thinking, yeah, my sport doesn't have loads of isometric. Well, in the brief period between, you know, you switching from an eccentric or a loading of movement into a concentric, there is a brief period of isometric. So the better we can, you know, make that changeover of movement really quick, the better, right? So it probably does apply, okay? And look, my experience of this is when I did an internship at Pepperdine in the US. So it was, where was it? Malibu. There it is. Malibu, California. I know I said Miami then. I did 6 weeks working with their D1 school, and the sports that they used to specialize in was basketball. They did have baseball and did have like some volleyball in there as well. And we used a bit of triphasic. You know, they were in off season, and this is one of those things to say like it is an off season type of program. That is the way most people will use it, because you need to spend a decent amount of time in each block in order to really maximize it. So you might spend 2 or 3 weeks in the eccentric, and then you're then going to push through to more isometric. Then it's going to be concentric. Okay. And you kind of float through it in that way. And it's sequential in a, you know, so you're going to go from eccentric, isometric, concentric. You're not going to kind of mix up that order. You know, the basic premise of how we structure training most of the time is that we are trying to create blocks that follow on from each other in some way, shape, or form. Like we want this adaptation to feed into the next adaptation, you know, so we might be creating more hypertrophy, knowing that it's going to give us more potential to produce force, and then we're going to use that force to create more power, and that's going to be the thing that leads into our sporting movement, right? Same kind of thing here. So it's off-season based. It might be 2 or 3 weeks, which means that it's really only going to be specially used in certain sports that have a long, decent off-season. What I would say is the feedback that I got from some of the athletes at Pepperdine was, I'm pretty fucked. Like it's quite neurally fatiguing. Like the central nervous system took a little bit of a shagging. And yeah, I think that was one thing. It took a lot of prep work. It was quite faffy, I'm going to say. So some of the eccentric work we were doing was essentially like, you're going to unrack a heavy bloody weight on your shoulders. We were doing a back squat, and you're going to lower it for like a 6 to an 8 second count, right? And we're talking like a 1RM type weight, but these guys are not peaked for a 1RM. They're literally just kind of rocking up and getting on with it. So they'd lower it, and then the partners would help them up, and they might do that for like 2 or 3 reps. Okay. So it's heavy, heavy work. That's a bit faffy if you're somebody that trains on their own, which means you might not be able to do it, or you might have to find creative ways. And we would do that for a squat. We'd do it for a bench. We'd do it for like pull up as well. And that's a bit of an issue. It makes it like logistically really challenging, and you can definitely get around it. There are multiple ways of using it. But yeah, that was the feedback that got given. Okay. Bit faffy. Neurally, I'm pretty shagged. But what I will say is, by the time that they kind of floated through, so I caught the last week of eccentric when I was there. I did 2 weeks of the isometric stuff, where they did a mixture of yielding isometrics, where they'd hold a heavy weight for a certain amount of time, and then they'd do some overcoming isos, which was you pushing against an object that isn't going to move. And then I caught a little bit of the concentric afterwards, which was a lot more typical power, that you might see. So they were like a fan of cleans and stuff like that. What I will say, general observations is, I would consider this to be quite an advanced training method. To be honest, doesn't mean you can't use it with, more beginner athletes. And in fact, if we think about like the elements of training, okay, having more of an eccentric phase, having more of an isometric phase, that's like, we will probably like coach athletes that are new to the gym in very similar ways, right? I really want you to control the tempo here, and I want you to pause in that bottom position for me. Really good for teaching movement, really good for keeping injuries away in those beginning, months of training, when they're really trying to figure out like what their tissue capacity is. So like, it's all, I think some of the smartest programs and the smartest like marketed stuff in the world is the stuff that's just based on reality. Like, it's principles that you just take and have. But what the problem is people take this thing, take Triphasic, take velocity-based training, take, I don't know, any powerlifting program in the world, and people turn it into their personality. People treat it as a religion and not a tool. Okay. So whenever you're thinking about, what do you think about this program? What do you think about that program? They're all tools. Same with like kettlebells. What do you think about kettlebells? I'm like, it's a tool. But most of the time when you speak to a kettlebell guy, it's like, nah, I'm a kettlebell guy. I pray to the kettlebell, and it's like, it doesn't, no tool is good for everything. They all have drawbacks. So look, like long way of basically saying, I don't have loads of experience doing this. I've used it with a couple of athletes over the past like 10 years, but I can't honestly remember what my general thoughts are. It was faffy was what I kind of got to, and there's going to be some guys out there that have way more experience than me in this area. And they might like say, Jord, that was a bullshit answer, or that was a great answer. I'm not sure, but let me know. Sweet. So that was Triphasic then. That's my general thoughts. Got another one. Did my LCL, so my lateral collateral ligament, which is the ligament on the outside of the knee, the same as you. What is going on, guys? Quick break in today's episode for me to ask you for a favor. If you enjoy these episodes, please do share them with a friend, okay? We don't run any paid ads on this type of podcast, so it's all organic, okay? So the more you can share it with an individual or put it on social media, it really, really helps. So if you could do that for me, I'd massively appreciate it. And let's get back into the episode. Thoughts on the rehab process. So, mate, my heart goes out to you. It is a scary, scary feeling. So, obviously, not knowing how you did it, knowing that it's probably jiu-jitsu, but not knowing how you did it, and actually not knowing what grade it is, and if you've been assessed, these are my thoughts. Get it scanned as soon as possible, okay? I realize not everyone's in a situation where they want to spend the money, but I would go and get it privately scanned as soon as possible. It'll literally be an ice cream van looking thing in an Asda car park, and it'll cost you 300 quid. I just think it's so worth it because it gives you clarity soon as possible on what your reality actually is, right? Don't just sit on this and think I'm fucked. Because as soon as you start rehabbing it anyway, you'll get to the end of the rehab and you feel good and you're still probably thinking, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I'm good. If you know grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, it just gives you an accurate picture of reality so you can then start to work on it properly with an appropriate timeline and rehab that is specific, right? That's my first thing. That would be it. Like, if you're injured, get emotions out the way and actually just get facts, okay? Obviously, if you're not in that situation where you've got 300 quid, cool, I get it. Go through GP, see if you can kind of pull some strings there and really kind of leverage it to get that done. Okay. But it's going to, like they said, it was going to take 12 weeks to get the MRI, and then it was going to be 4 weeks to get it assessed. And then, you're 4 months down the line, and realistically, you're going to start to see some positive outcomes anyway. But yeah, so look, that's what I do. A few things to think about, like not knowing exactly like the situation is whenever you get an injury, okay, if it's a knee injury, if it's a shoulder injury, an elbow injury, to an extent, it is a brain injury as well. Okay, the brain is now going to change the way that it wants to interact with that joint, that structure, that tissue, because it sensed damage. So it's not going to want to overload and treat movement the same because it's scared of that thing. It senses alarm. It's a little bit uneasy. We need to basically teach the brain and convince the brain that it is safe to load that tissue, load that joint. And, it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight, but you're going to use a bunch of like isometrics. You're going to integrate movement into it. You're then going to try and challenge that structure in more sport-specific domains. Okay. So yeah, it's a brain injury. So don't just think as soon as you are pain-free that you've rehabbed it. That's probably the worst thing you could do. You want to make sure that you're loading the tissues around it as much as you can. Okay, so thinking about the lateral knee. Okay, if you're kind of feeling for the lateral knee there, you'll feel that the quads kind of wrap around and touch on the outside of the knee. The hamstrings also wrap around and touch on the outside of the knee. So you want to make sure the quads and the hamstrings get super strong. And you can bias lateral quad and lateral hamstring, and you can make sure that those structures get nice and worked. We used like a lot of hamstring isometric based things, so like a reverse plank type of vibe. So basically take your leg, straighten it out fully, now bend it just a little bit so you've got a slight bend, and then you're going to dig your heel into the floor whilst you're laying on the ground, trying to lift your bum off the ground a little bit so you're really kind of getting a lot of load through the hamstring. Go single leg. Once you've got single leg, you're then going to play around with knee positions, okay, rolling it in, rolling it out, just to kind of challenge the inside and the outside. You then do quad, okay? So we're going to go through split squat based movements, go through squats, and yeah, just really trying to think about what your foot pressure is and how you're maximally trying to recruit the quads and keep it nice and activated. We're thinking about co-contraction. That's one of the amazing things about the situation we're in with Adapt is we have Ollie Evans, who's a fucking unreal physio, and gets the gym and gets sport. Like he's a great athlete, but also just really good in the S&C domain, as well as being a wizard when it comes to the human body. So having him a part of like the squad, like the coaching team at Adapt, is awesome because he just helps us with that. He guides us through that process. His expertise is his expertise. We can do our best job of like trying to gradually piece that up, but having him there just guides it. So yeah, that's why I'd be thinking co-contractions around the joints to make sure that the brain feels happy. Look, be cautious. Okay. It takes time to rehab anything, but depending on the severity of it is going to dictate like how long you need to wait. And look, just adjust your training. Okay. Like you've still got another leg. You've still got lots of areas of that leg that can be worked hard, and you can still get super strong upper body wise, and you can still focus on your conditioning and all that. Right. So there's my general thoughts on it. Just taking another drink out of this poverty IKEA glass. Right, what we got here. Let me get the next question. Bear with me, my phone's gone. Okay, so something people spend too much time on and something the opposite. So something people spend too much time on. The fucking sofa, thinking about things but not doing it, is probably my honest answer there. I think planning and prep and stuff like that's obviously really important, but I think action is just the thing, get out there and do the thing, like write the program, go do the program. I think people paralyze themselves too much by just thinking of every negative outcome in the world. So yeah, I just think you've got to take action. You've got a goal, go get the goal. Like, thinking about it just doesn't accomplish anything really, like, anymore. So that's what I'd be thinking. Like, I think that's what people spend too much time doing is just sat. Okay, take action, get some shit done. Main character energy is my honest thoughts there. I know that probably wasn't the response that we were thinking about, but that's it. Get out there and do the thing. Fucking, you can tell I'm inspired. I've had 3 coffees. Yeah, I've been trying the pink monster, which is the strawberry one, which is unreal. So if there's any monster enthusiasts out there, yeah, strawberry dreams. It is beautiful. And then the opposite of that. So things that people don't spend a lot of time on or don't spend enough time on: conditioning. Okay, conditioning is the thing. And I was this guy. I still really enjoy the gym. Like, I'm still a bro at the end of the day. I'm still about getting bigger, getting stronger. I think that those things are super valuable, and I think everybody should be looking to get stronger. And for most people, it is the lowest hanging fruit, is the easiest thing to grab, and it's probably the thing that'll make the biggest difference to their performance. Me personally, like, conditioning has been a little bit of a weakness for a while. I wasn't super aerobically fit. I was aerobically challenged. So I think, yeah, just getting on top of your energy system development stuff. And I get it though, because it's not as taught, it's not as understood, it's not as, for me, not as fun. Like, I dread conditioning. I really don't enjoy it, which is actually probably one of the reasons that I've really enjoyed getting into it, because I feel like there's a real sense of accomplishment when I force myself to get on that fucking horrible watt bike in the garage. Is when I complete it, I feel way better. Like, I just feel happy that I've done it. I feel happy that I've accomplished it, knowing that, it is a gut wrenching and not my favorite thing to do. But quickly, just kind of make the point of why I think people should focus on conditioning more is, look, it's going to enhance your recovery between gym sets, between reps, between workouts, so that you can train to a higher quality and get better gains. So regardless of whether your goal is gym-based things or hypertrophy and all that, is like, get after it. Make sure that you are not, like me, and aerobically challenged. And we think about, like, I've fed into this. Okay, I'll put my hands up and say, like, athletes shouldn't train like bodybuilders. They should, to an extent, because you know what? There are a lot of benefits to what bodybuilding, the sport, actually does. Okay, I don't think it's so dissimilar. Like, they have really good key concepts. The way they approach hypertrophy, obviously the best in the world. Like, they are the best in class because they actually build muscle, right? Don't get me wrong, there's areas of their structure and their scheduling that we might not agree with, but what they do is, like, aerobic, like, their cardio is pretty much just a part of their training year round. At least the bodybuilders that do it properly, they're ticking that box. They're making sure that, one, aerobically they are in a good situation. They will clock up 40 minutes, 45 minutes of steady state stuff, right? Don't get me wrong, they might not always be doing it for health, but does it matter? Like, they might be doing it more just to help with digestion and general burn a little bit of calories towards a cut or a gaining phase, whatever, but they're still getting conditioning work in. So I think, I went off on one there, but, like, looking at different sports and how they basically approach things is always valuable, and you'll start to see key themes pop up. But yeah, anyway, so regardless of what your goal is, it's just going to help you with recovery. Okay, so you're going to be able to train better, train more, which is obviously beneficial. Okay, I think you're going to have better quality sessions. Your results will be better. Your sport's going to benefit from it. And look, like, the more research that comes out about, like, conditioning, there's so many different ways of going about it, and people, like, love to say that, like, it's not an aerobic sport. And you know what? So many sports are more aerobic than you think. Like, after the first sprint, which still has an aerobic contribution to it. So if you're sprinting, I don't know, 40 meters, 30 meters, whatever, there is still going to be an element of aerobic contribution. And then for every sprint after that, even if you rest for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes in between each sprint, I can't remember what the specifics of the study were, but it might go from, okay, the aerobic system is contributing 70% to that 40-meter sprint. Okay, it might have been a Wingate or a 30-second. I can't remember exactly. And then the second sprint, it then goes up to like 50% aerobic contribution. Then it's higher. So conditioning is just the one, right? You need to be able to. You need to be able to touch those max outputs. You need to be able to do the thing. Like, nobody cares how many times you cannot dunk the basketball. You need to be able to dunk the basketball if you're going into NBA. Okay, so that needs to be like the minimum thing. So if you don't have that ability to do the thing, then cool. Okay, you being able to not dunk it more times probably isn't that beneficial. However, if you are somebody that has a decent like level of output, then let's work on repeatability. Okay, let's work on your ability to actually, and this goes back to like skill as well. Like, I did a post on this and I'll repost it to be fair because this was valuable, but like they've done research at different levels of heart rate. So they took somebody that was fully rested, somebody at 50% max heart rate, 80%, and then 90% of max heart rate, and got them to shoot a certain amount of basketballs. Okay. And guess what? What you find is when people get more tired, they work at higher heart rates, their accuracy and their performance drops off. Okay. So as you start working at higher intensities, you don't like score as many, right? Cool. Okay. Well, think about what the sport is. It's high intensity. So let's actually work on that ability. The way that you actually get somebody to have a lower heart rate in general, okay, is by getting them fitter. Okay. So look, it ties in so many things. So all that to say, things that people don't spend enough time on for me is conditioning. Right. Next question. Starting a podcast. Thoughts? So for me, this is probably one of those questions that I'm answering not as adapt, not as like a strength and conditioning coach really, but probably more as a business owner, somebody that, for those of you that don't know, I have a second business, which is Build. And it's a mentorship. Okay. So I basically help other coaches build a coaching business, a brand, help them with marketing, developing a service that they're proud of, and really just trying to help people, make more of a stable living out of a really volatile and complicated industry, to be honest. So that's my second business. And, we speak a lot about like marketing and strategy and how you go about putting your best stuff out there. Because ultimately, like, there is so much information. There are so many like prominent characters out there. Like, you need to be able to put great info out there to convince customers to work with you ultimately. Like, and you convince people not by being slimy, but you convince people by giving them solutions to their problems, giving them evidence that you have solved their problems. So eventually, once, a year down the line, 3 years down the line, or sometimes the next day down the line, they need an S&C coach, you're the first person, right? Because they're the first person they think of because you've demonstrated to them and you've had conversation, you haven't been too pushy, and you've just, been sound, right? So one of the things we speak about in the mentorship is having a variety of content streams, I guess you could say. You obviously have your short form, which is your social media, which is like reels, carousels. It's Instagram, okay? It's a short form platform. It is not there for people to spend hours and hours consuming your content. People aren't going to binge it too much. What I would recommend is you actually treat, the short form platform that is Instagram as a short form platform. Don't expect it to be the best place to convert people and really trying to convince them to work with you. I would be looking at trying to take people from Instagram over to a podcast, YouTube, a blog, an email list, something where you can really kind of go into deep detail about particular topics. Because look, right, you're listening to this podcast right here. So you've come from Instagram, or you might have been listening to it for a while or whatever, but you're listening to me speak. What are we? We're 22 minutes into this episode now, yeah? You probably don't think I'm a knobhead. Well, you might do, but you're still listening, right? But the thing is, like, you're listening to it. I'm hopefully providing some form of value. When there does come a time and a place where you're thinking, oh, actually, I do need an S&C coach. I've got a goal. I want to rehab. We might be the people that you recommend, because you might have spent this 20 minutes and you might have consumed all the episodes previously. So you might have accumulated 50 hours worth of listening to me. That's better. That is, you're going to have way more trust in what I know than, somebody that you've only spent 5 reels looking at. Okay. So it's about like creating long-term trust and brand. That's why I think having a podcast is a really good idea. And if you don't want to start a podcast, go on other people's podcasts. If you don't want to do that, you don't feel confident enough, I get it, right? Start a blog, do something where there's a little bit more prep time. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of podcasts, right? I think it's a huge thing. I'm also a really big fan of like YouTube, but when you go to YouTube, there is definitely a little bit more of an expectation that you're going to be decent at editing, to be honest. and it takes a little bit more time. But YouTube is the second biggest search engine in the world, right? Okay, so when people do search for strength and conditioning coach for this, like, it makes sense. So yeah, what are my thoughts? Do it, honestly. Like, let's go back to the previous question. Things people spend too much time on: the sofa, thinking about doing a podcast. Do a podcast. Do 5 episodes and then make a decision. What's the statistics? It's something like only 1% of podcasts make it past episode 50. Yeah. Okay. So to be the top 1% of all podcasters get to 51 episodes, right? And I think it goes down to 0.01 when you get to 100. Okay. So I'm chasing that down. Yeah, I think just do it. Like, it's an interesting thing when you go from doing so much short form content, of being able to spend realistically as long as you want, being able to think about a topic and put some great words out there and reshoot, coming onto a podcast where you're expected just to riff and go. And it really kind of challenges you, because you might not know as much about a topic as you think you know about a topic. And in the nature of ChatGPT, where everybody can realistically seem smart over a carousel post or a reel, this is, don't get me wrong, you can still, I'm going to say quotations, cheat a podcast. I could re-record this 15 times if it sounds shit. I could also have a script there that I'm reading from. People will do that. But I just think it's that next level. We're having a conversation. Me and you, bro, we are having a chat. Okay, cool. So that's my thoughts. Do it. Less time thinking, more time doing the thing. How useful do I think exercise tier lists are for the industry? It's a good question. And mate, to be honest, I don't mind them, honestly. Like, I don't look at them and think, yeah, that's a terrible thing. I don't think they're gold standard, because obviously context is always going to be the most important thing. Like, you can have an amazing exercise that you think ticks so many boxes from an adaptation standpoint. Let's take something like resisted sprinting. We're like, okay, on paper, resisted sprinting with a sled where it's attached at the hip is an awesome exercise. It's great for projection. It's great for improving stiffness at the ankle and improving people's 10 and 20 meter sprint times. What an amazing exercise. Let's put that at the top, okay? Okay, well, the next step is, I actually don't have a sled, or the sled that I've got shit, or I don't have a harness, or the ground around me is really sketchy, so I can't actually identify whether, it's adding this amount of load. I just think, I don't mind these tier lists, and they do what they say on the tin. It's a quick, short, sharp. These are the exercises that I value based on this thing. So the more you can get specific about it, the better. But like, that doesn't sell. Like, you want to be able to get something across really quickly. And the more you try and cover your back and say, this is the best exercise for rugby players that are competing in the Southern Hemisphere, that are this age, that have this availability, that have a training split of this, it's like you just lose people. So sometimes it's like, these are the best exercises for rugby players sprinting, or something like that, right? So I get it from a marketing standpoint. We've used like progression streams for a long time. So for people that aren't aware, like, a progression stream is essentially, you might have like let's take a vertical pull progression stream, and essentially just consider it like a continuum. Okay, so on one side to the left, you're going to have easiest or the most regressed exercise, and then on the right hand side, you've got the most progressed or the most complicated, or the one that you can load the most. Like, progression streams can be ranked. That continuum can be based on stability, can be based on load achieved, or you could even do a progression stream based on how useful you see it being to this particular player, right? So whatever, you've basically just got a step-by-step process of a progression. So a vertical pull in one, it might be the most advanced progression on a progression stream is a weighted pull-up, right? Okay, so that's the big dog. That's big dog. Yeah. The next one back from that is, okay, can you do bodyweight pull-ups? Cool. If you can't do a bodyweight pull-up, it might be that you are going to do a isometric pull-up where you jump to the top and then you lower yourself, pausing at 3 different positions for 2 seconds. Then it might be eccentrics. Past that point, it might be a dead hang. Okay, and then it might be banded. Okay, so like a progression stream in that sense. Like, I know it's not a tier list, but it's a similar type of thing. Like, I think that's the next layer along, because when you see one that says this is the gold standard exercise, I'm always a little bit like, yeah, okay, it's cool. and I do value this. I'm going to tell you why I value exercise tier lists, and I don't think they're horrendous. If using a tier list keeps people out of the clutches of people like Naudi from Functional Patterns or Joel Seedman, I'm happy. Even if these tier lists do lack a little bit of context, if it just keeps people on the straight and narrow and at least keeps them focusing on the things that are like decently valuable, then cool, I'm happy. As soon as you start getting into the weeds of digging into, you know what, they might not be the best tool, that's okay. But I'm open to discussion on this. Like, if people have different thoughts on it, like, take it. I just think it's not the worst thing in the world. I've definitely seen worse. Okay, so last question for us then is best speed / footwork sessions for rugby, having had 6 months off. And you know what? This is decently like a common issue, right? Taking time off and wanting to return back to athletic endeavors. And you know what? The fact that you've actually registered that you've had time off is probably the first step, because having time off, that your body might be a little bit soft in areas. You're not going to be perfectly like ready to dive into something like super high intensity right away. So how I would approach this is, let's tackle the speed side of things, and then let's think about footwork and what that means. But like, from a speed perspective, some of the things I really like is sleds. I know I spoke about it just a second ago, but like sled work, I think is cool. So like resisted sleds, it will slow down your sprint speed a little bit, which is decent. It's going to give you an opportunity to gradually build up, just so you're not going straight into a super high velocity activity with a body that just isn't accustomed to it yet. So sleds are really good. It teaches you good sprint mechanics in terms of projecting yourself forward, good extension. It gives you more time to basically, once you've pushed off, to get that other limb through to then snap through. So I like them. If you don't have a sled, well, to be fair, so when in lockdown, I'd literally get a bloody Asda bag for life, put like, what I put in, 5 kilo or 10 kilos worth of, I think I had a dumbbell in there, go to a field. I used a dog lead, tied that around my waist. We were proper in lockdown. And that was the sled, right? And it worked really, really well, because we didn't have hills. This is when I was back home in Grimsby. We didn't have hills, but that'd also be another option. By being on a little bit of an incline, it's going to give you an opportunity to really lean into it a little bit. It slows you down, and you're going to have less injuries as a result. So I'm a fan, okay? That would be how I would approach it for a little while. So I would do some hill work or some sled work for a bit, and then gradually just introduce some shorter sprints, 5 meters, 10 meters, gradually build up the intensity of the thing. That'd be how I would approach it. In terms of like footwork, okay, let's just break down footwork. What people generally mean is like agility, okay, or change of direction, okay. So how I would be approaching this is like having a change of direction element to most of these sprinting sessions. And you know what, like, play with it a little bit. It could be a 505 style thing. It could be a pro agility. It could be you run forward 5 meters, you plant the foot and you turn 90 degrees to the right. It could be a bunch of backpedaling. You've got options. And I think what I encourage people to do when it comes to like change of direction based things is I will always program an element of this, right? I'll give them 3 or 4 drills that are probably quite extreme in nature. So it might be you run forward 5 meters, then you're going to plant that foot and you're actually going to turn back on yourself, but to an angle, okay? It might be that you do a sharp 90. It might be a 180. But what we're basically trying to do is give them a little bit of a continuum of skills and ways of organizing their body under an environment that's pretty like steady. It's scheduled. You know what you're doing, okay? And then I usually give people the opportunity to fuck around a little bit. Like, cool, you got 5 reps. Within these reps, I don't want you to accumulate any more than 10 or 15 or 20 meters, whatever guidance I give them. I'm like, play around with something that you feel like you need to work on, that you've identified in a game or a match that you're not amazing at from a change of direction standpoint. Mess around, right? And it's helping me to bridge the gap with them, right? They know what they're great at, what they're not great at potentially. So that's their opportunity. So yeah, once you've done a little bit of change direction, okay, which I do think, look, give it a bit of time. You don't want to go full pelt, and it also depends how much time you've actually had off. I would then start to sprinkle in a little bit of reactive elements, okay? So just doing change of direction alone isn't necessarily always going to translate into, rugby itself. Like game speed is going to be a little bit different. So can you have a partner there that's basically giving you some commands? So is it as simple as going on a clap? Is it then pointing in the direction of where you need to go? Is it you getting a ball passed to you from one of two directions? Is it simple red, white, blue in terms of cones and the directions you go? So just adding a little bit more pressure, a little bit more of a time constraint, a little bit more of a fuck, right, I've got to go to this situation. Okay, so that's like the next layer. So after change direction, you've now got change of direction in response to a stimulus. Okay, so we're getting closer to what we would classify as agility. And then the next layer on this is like actually going into like one-on-one situations or two-on-one, or like more game, like more sport-like situations where not only are you having to change direction, but you're having to do it in response to a sport-specific stimulus, where you're having to actually read the game, read body language of people, see where the ball is situated, see what the end task is, and actually use your skills in that scenario, which is what we would classify as agility. So you gradually want to build through that. So I think just to summarize, take your time building up the sprint work. Okay, make sure your gym work actually supports this as well. Would be something I'd think about. You want to reduce the hamstring loading for a little while, just to give it an opportunity, and then gradually phase it in. I would be doing a bit of change direction scattered in through the week as well, and then gradually ramp it up and make it a little bit more intense from a sporting standpoint. So yeah, that's how I would approach it, to be honest with you. And it's the answer we don't like sometimes is, look, you just need to give yourself a bit of time. Like, we all want to rush it, and that's probably like a really bad trait of human beings in general, is like we think we're going to be fine. We think an injury will never happen to us. And then when it happens to us, we're proper beeling about it. We're not happy. So yeah, cool. Right. There are my questions that I want to answer. So I got these pretty quick through. So I wanted to box this off. I've got a couple of meetings to do today, and I've got a bit of coaching as well, which is cool. So I'm gonna skedaddle. If you have any thoughts on the questions and the answers that I gave today, please let us know. If you enjoyed the episode, please let us know. And if you are in the market for a coach, that's going to take sports science, bring it to you, apply it to your life, and get you to where you want to be, give us a shout. We're not always taking on new athletes. But yeah, give us a shout if it's something you're interested in, and we'll just chat about it. Like, quite often, if we're not in a situation to help you, I will refer you out to somebody else, or just kind of put you on a waiting list. So sweet. Cool. Right. Have a good day, guys. I hope you have a good rest of the week as well. Speak soon. Okay, that is the end of today's episode, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, please do let us know, and then share it with somebody who may find this episode interesting. Okay, see you next time. Cheers.